Hey, welcome back to another just like little quick short episode of the Oner podcast. We're just going to do a
Yeah.
quick little trailer reaction for Fantastic Four First Steps. This is a
Yes,
movie that we talked about in our breakdown of like movies
we
that were
did.
anticipated for
Yep.
2025, and we gave our predictions for all of the biggest
Yep.
movies of 2025. Now we've got a teaser for this, and
Yeah.
I want to know, my first question that I have for you, Kramer, is have your feelings or predictions about this movie changed now that you've seen the creative direction for it?
Well, my prediction was that it's gonna be the best Fantastic Four movie.
Okay, that's
Uh,
right.
and my I'm not changing that prediction because I still think that that is true.
I think
But
you're
it does
actually probably right. Yeah.
but, it is funny, after seeing this, I gotta say I'm a little more excited about it,
Mhm.
and I don't know if it's gonna be good, but watching it, I'm like, "Okay, they're really leaning into the corniness of it."
That was my problem, is like when it came to our predictions for the movie, I
Yeah,
was like, "I just don't think this property can be done. I just think
yeah,
it's too corny."
yeah,
It's just too, and then it's like looking at the aesthetic of this film, setting it in like the 1960s or
yeah,
50s and doing
yeah,
this very like Incredibles-esque
yes,
aesthetic,
yeah,
feels like you might be able to, like, leaning into the corniness, feels
yeah,
like you that might be the only way to do it right, is you've gotta lean into the
yeah.
hokey kind of, like, all in,
Yeah,
it's almost like Leave It to Beaver
yeah,
if they were all superheroes, you know?
yeah, it's kind of like, "Oh, this is like, it's a little ridiculous," but they're leaning into it, and I really do like the aesthetic of it, looking at the cars and kind of like how they did, The Thing,
Mhm.
they didn't try to make him look cool, they tried to make him look like he does in the comic, and I'm like, "That just kind of works."
I will say I think that it's a little shoddy CDI CGI.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
not like the best CGI I've ever
No,
seen. Like, when
no.
he first shows up in the trailer, right away, I'm like, I feel like
Yeah, yeah,
maybe, like, the previous versions looked a little more realistic than this. He looks a little more cartoonish, but maybe
yeah.
that's the idea, is he just kinda looks a little bit like a Pixar character to me a little bit, but,
Yeah, I
like,
could see that, yeah, he
maybe
does.
that's the idea, is to lean into the
Yeah.
cartooniness of it? I don't
Yeah.
know.
I think it
Um,
is, and it will be interesting. I am really interested to see what the end of this movie is, because where does this movie fit within the MCU? I mean, I think it's another timeline or another dimension, or my other prediction now that I'm seeing the trailer, I is this like a vision that Wanda is giving someone? Because it feels a lot like WandaVision. And it's like, is this something that really didn't happen, like in the end, or so I don't
v
know. We'll see what it is.
Very interesting theory. If they did make an entire movie that was Fantastic Four and it wound up being just Wanda giving someone a vision,
That'd
I
be
think
weird.
that would kinda suck.
It
Like,
would suck. It would
I'd
suck
be
for
like,
sure.
"Well," it's like, then why even bother doing it?
I
But
know.
I agree with you. It's definitely got a lot in common aesthetically to WandaVision, but it does obviously beg a lot of questions about the prime MCU timeline, that if there
Yes.
always was this superhero team called the Fantastic Four in the 1960s of
Yeah.
this time. So,
Yeah.
like, what we know about the prime MCU timeline is that in the 40s, Captain America was made and he was the
Yeah.
first Avenger. He went into the ice and didn't reemerge till the early 2000s.
Yep.
And in the interim, uh, the Stark family was still continuing to be
Yeah.
arms dealers and
Yeah.
things like that. It could feasibly be that somewhere in the mid 20th century, there was this superhero team called the Fantastic Four, and
Mhm.
that maybe they phased out and disappeared by like the 80s or 90s, and that
Yeah.
there was, before Iron Man emerges in like 2005 ish, or two, whatever, whenever
Yeah.
Iron Man first crops up, there's been an absence of super beings. But
Yeah.
it does still beg the question of like, how could no one have ever mentioned the Fantastic
Yeah.
Four ever before? In
Yeah.
and I think that alternate timeline is maybe the option that maybe makes the most sense. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's kind of what I'm thinking, because yeah, it's like they're too, I mean, a guy who turns into a flame and can fly, like that's just too big
yeah.
to have been in there. But, so it's either an alternate dimension that leads to something that I'm sure, or maybe it's, I mean, I don't see it not connecting, but we'll find out, I guess.
You know what I would love? is
What?
if they just weren't trying to put it in a connected universe at all. If it was
Yeah,
just a
yeah,
movie about the Fantastic Four that's set in the 1960s, and it was
could
just
be.
like, like how DC will just do Joker, and it's just set in its own Gotham City, and it's not connected to anything else,
Yeah,
and it's I just I
yeah,
would I just
that
look
is
at this and
nice.
go, because I look at this trailer and go, there's a lot of things aesthetically here that really feel like this movie more than any of the other movie adaptations
Yeah,
is understanding the vibe of Fantastic Four and
yeah.
leaning into the vibe of it. But what will make the movie kind of frustrating or make it potentially not work is if the movie is going to try to like retcon the MCU timeline to like
Well,
okay, yeah,
okay, so do you know about the announcement about Robert Downey Jr.,
that he's playing Doctor Doom.
Doctor Doom?
Right.
So, Doctor Doom is a Fantastic Four character. It's like,
Right.
as we were talking, I'm just thinking like, okay, this has to be another timeline that probably in the end explains how a Stark became Doctor Doom, or
Yeah, do you think it's
however
that
the
in this timeline, instead of becoming Iron Man, Tony Stark becomes
Doctor Doom. That's
Doctor Doom?
kind of what I think. Yeah, like
Yeah.
he turns evil. So that
But why
probably makes the most sense.
and I guess in this timeline, Tony Stark is, like a 60-year-old man in the 1960s
Possibly, yeah. Or
instead of
maybe
being
it's
a
yeah,
yeah,
maybe he's his dad or who knows how. Yeah,
yeah.
we'll see how it all works out, but
But I don't see how they could possibly join this to the prime MCU timeline and try to
yeah,
fit it in there. I
I
just
agree.
don't see how that could possibly work, especially given
No.
RDJ's presence in the
Yeah,
film. I just
exactly.
don't see how like, it's got to be alternate timeline. And honestly, like I said, my personal preference would be not even alternate timeline, not even offshoot
Yeah,
multiverse timeline, just its own thing that
yeah,
Marvel Studios just start saying, "We're gonna start making superhero stories that don't need to be part of this shared cinematic universe,"
right, right.
because this movie, if it was just its own thing, and it was just I would be like, "That looks cool. That looks like a
Yeah,
potentially good Fantastic Four movie." But
yeah,
knowing that they're gonna have to try to figure out some kind of ham-fisted justification for as to how this fits
yeah,
into
yeah,
the MCU makes me go, "Okay, let's see you guys pull this off."
yeah.
But my prediction, I will say, has maybe shifted a little bit to going,
Okay.
"This could work."
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good. Yeah, and I
yeah,
I was pleasantly surprised by it, like, "Okay, this looks pretty fun."
yeah.
And I think that's the good like we said, that's the probably the best way that you can do this is make this fun because these characters are a little weird or they're a little out of date now,
Mhm.
and, so yeah, I actually thought, "Okay, that looks pretty fun." I'm it piqued my interest for sure.
It does look like a I love the end of the trailer with the singing
Yeah.
"Fantastic Four."
I
I'm like,
love
"That's
that too.
fun," because
That is fun.
that's pretty, like,
Yeah.
overtly corny. It also looks like it does look like a live action Incredibles to me. Like, the
Yeah,
aesthetic is
it does, yeah.
very,
Yeah.
kinda
Mid-century modern type, yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. So, we'll see,
Yeah.
and that's our thoughts on the Fantastic Four teaser. Let
Yep.
us know what you think. What are your predictions for the film, and how do you think it could work into the MCU? And,
Yep.
we'll see you on our next full episode, whenever that might be.
Yep. Have
Take
a
it
good one.
easy. Okay, bye-bye.